Hi and welcome to this another episode of ECCB Connects. This week we'll be discussing land registration. Stay with us, we'll be right back.
It's coming!
It's coming!
It's coming.
It's coming!
It's coming!
It's coming!
Danny, welcome again to ECCB Connects.
Thank you for having me, Sharmila.
In our last program, we discussed the work the ECCB is undertaking to improve the ease of doing business in its member countries. One of the reforms identified is the ECCU Land Registry Project. Why is land registration important?
Land registration is very important for the national, for the community, and at the individual level to ensure that data, information, documents related to land are accurate, so that there is very little difficulty when it comes to disputes and arbitration to how to settle them.
What currently exists with respect to land registration in the ECCB member countries?
Because ECCB countries, the 6 independent countries, have Anglophone and Francophone background.
And by that we mean English and French influence.
Certainly. What has happened, laws and ordinances related thereto have come from them. So that's a legacy that has come down. What it means, therefore, that in some countries, when you refer to land, you hear terms like deeds, you hear terms like trust deeds, you hear terms like certificate of titles. There are varying levels of certification that one would have provided before they've had the final document in their hands. And so, that being the case, you have in some countries both. You have both where you have deeds and certificates of titles, and some where they live primarily without. But the best without having certificate of title, but more so with trusts and deeds. What most of the countries are working to ensure efficiency, best practices, and competitiveness is to have certificates of titles. And so the forms that are used to do that are digitized spaces and spatial separation representations, which are then converted into a digital media.
You mentioned best practices to have a certificate of title. You also mentioned that in some countries you have deeds, conveyances. What's the difference?
Well, with the deeds, it shows intent from one generation to another, or from one individual to another with respect to a transfer. However, with the certificate of title, there are some additional open verification, which means that it gets put in the press and it has people query or state whether there are any claims against the estate. So I think that is the easiest one that I can think of.
So that makes one sort of more valid than the other?
Well, I cannot speak to validity because that's a legal term, but I can say that I do know that one is more tamper-proof than the other, which would be the certificate of title.
You mentioned 2 types of surveys, the discrete and spatial. Explain, please.
When one speaks about discrete and separate, a surveyor goes on the ground and takes a piece of land which is separate from another piece in another part of the country, and they're also discrete. They're not together. Whereas when you have an aircraft fly over and do aerial photography where it's digitized, what that does, it takes into account the whole country, and then it can be subdivided into what would have been those discrete and separate surveys put together in one place.
And it makes it easier for location and identification?
Everything about it is provides more information because it allows you to see clear demarcation of contours, clear demarcation of other landforms, historical and others. And what it does, it's more accurate, because one surveyor can go and do a discrete survey and comes up with a rendering, and another one might be off by a small percentage. However, if you're dealing with, a digital survey, you're likely to be precise and accurate.
Less room for errors.
Yes.
Let's look now at the ECCU Land Registry Project. What will it entail?
First is to have an assessment, and I can say to you that was done between the ECCB and the World Bank some time ago, where surveys were sent to us. We dispatched them to all the countries, asking what they do have in each country, what applies. These surveys were sent back. They were submitted to the World Bank, they were analyzed, and it was found that there is a great need to modernize the land registry system. What happens after is to have a pilot and take into account what's going to be required. There are going to be the hardware side and the software side. There are going to be considerations for policy changes, and there are going to be considerations for, augmenting budgetary requirements to make sure that this is not only successful, but is sustainable in each and every country.
What are the key benefits of having this modern and regionally integrated land registration process?
It makes information transfer easy. It makes assets transfer easy. With this system, what it does, it has something called transferring collateral. If we're referring to the OECS as a single block, one ultimately should be able to use a piece of land in St. Vincent as collateral for something they're doing in another country. For that to be so, both countries must agree on the origin, the form it presents itself in. So just like we have a OECS Common Court, we accept the rules. Once something has been done in St. Vincent, it's acceptable in St. Kitts. So it's that level of ease with land registries. It makes it easy to settle disputes. It makes it easy to convert it to cash, if that's what one wants to do, or to transfer it to another beneficiary, if that is your ultimate request. Or if the Crown wishes to use the land for a national purpose, it makes it easier for them to know the boundaries of that piece of land that they're interested in. Those are some. It's limited, but not the exclusive possibilities of what, this would allow, the benefits.
And so, Danny, this will help to eliminate some of the challenges some families encounter, for example, when you have a death of a relative and you have to divide the estate.
Oh, certainly. If you have a document that shows it cannot be tampered with, you can have a will, which speaks to a deed. But if there is a certificate of title, it means that that deed document has been probated. It means that it has passed another test of verification, and so it makes it easy to reduce, disagreements, arbitration costs, and the transfer of, the property to the next beneficiary.
This modern land registration process will naturally require some changes in existing systems and structures, changes to policies and regulations, and it will also require development of some new skills. What are the key issues member governments have to consider, or what are the structures they will need to put in place to really make it happen?
Change usually takes on 4 key areas. There must be institutional at the policy level. There must be human resource. There must be the consideration for the equipment that you're going to use, and fourthly, the technology. Of course, money answers all things, so that is, the budgetary allocation must be made for all of those. So for bringing into being the new policies, making sure that you have the trained human resource, technical skills to ensure, one, planning, implementation, evaluation of any new system. Then you must make sure that you have appropriate equipment, which means one is going to require database and hardware that will allow you to populate the database. And then, the requisite different technologies that will allow you to do that. So I think those are very important considerations, but it would have to be, first of all, education, public awareness, and public education is fundamental. You have to tell the people. If you don't, they are going to have problems wanting to know why this is to be done.
And land ownership is a key issue for people, a very personal issue.
Especially in this region.
In our region, yes. How far along is the ECCB with this project?
Well, the project is at the stage right now where fairly shortly there will be a meeting held here at ECCB where we are going to bring some of the key stakeholders from all of the countries to sit down and discuss, because there are many issues and you do not want to thrust the project on people before that. Then once there's that, we'll see the state of readiness and then who will be best prepared or able to do the pilot, after which there'll be a rollout across the countries. That may require the development of a full project so that countries that don't already have some system in place can put a system in place and secure the required funding to make sure this happens.
You mentioned key stakeholders. Who are some of these players?
Key stakeholders would be people, private sector, individuals like surveyors and government surveyors on the public sector side. You would need ministries of planning. You would need people who work in the registries. You would need lawyers. You would need ministers of finance. You would need, the OECS, people from the OECS Commission, people from other international, regional organizations that may have a vested interest in this particular best practice.
The project is still in its initial stages, and you mentioned public education. What can people do in the meantime to sort of prepare to receive this?
Well, it's always important to find out what you can from surveyors. Maybe go to your registry, ask them, what is the state of affairs? Do they have any meetings or gatherings where they do share information? How can you get frequently asked questions? How can you access such a place?
Danny, and I think another key step individuals need to take is to examine the type of document they have.
I think that is critically important, because then you would know, based on what we have said before, whether you have a deed, whether you have a trust deed, or whether you have a certificate of title. Once you examine the document, you can get a second opinion from a legal authority as to, how good a document you have. But the best practice is to have a certificate of title, because this would have been subjected to several tiers of verification.
Danny, thank you very much for speaking with us on ECCB Connects.
Thank you very much for having me, Ms. Ramalan. It was my pleasure.
To view any episode of ECCB Connects anytime, any place, at your convenience, check us out on YouTube, Facebook, and LinkedIn at ECCB Connects.
We've come to the end of this week's episode of ECCB Connects. Thank you very much for watching. Join us again next week for another program.